In this video, we'll learn how to create adjustment layers and adjustment stacks here inside of MARI. Alright, so in the last video we learned about layer masks and mask stacks, and we'll talk about those a little bit more towards the end of this video. But I left you when we actually created a mask stack for this feather line work layer. Now what I didn't show you is you can actually flatten this stack back down into a normal layer mask. And all we need to do is right click on the layer, go to Layer Mask, and choose Flatten Mask Stack. Now when I do that, you'll see MARI's going through the process of actually baking this down. And you can see down here in the status bar what the progress is of that particular action. So now I know there's some color on these feathers, and that was not there in the previous video, but we're going to use this as sort of an illustration and kind of a transition into a conversation about adjustment layers. Now, adjustment layers are not something new to a Photoshop user. If you've used Photoshop, Photoshop has a number of different adjustment layers. Adjustment layers inside of MARI, it's the same basic concept. What we're going to do here is we're going to take and we're going to slot in an adjustment layer above maybe this tattoo line work layer so that this affects everything in the tattoos group. And we're going to basically, let's say we want to take all of the color out. We're going to use a luminosity adjustment layer. We can create that adjustment layer using this button right over here. And you'll see there are a tremendous amount of adjustment layers, each one doing something different, but I'm going to choose luminosity. Now when I do that, watch what happens. MARI's going to think about that for just a moment here, and it's going to actually apply that to the contents of this tattoos group. You can see the resulting image looks like we've converted the color in these feathers to black and white information. Now, this may not be the functionality that you're used to when it comes to adjustment layers. If you're coming from the world of Photoshop, then this would have affected everything underneath this luminosity layer, including these layers that are not inside the tattoos group. Now there's one critical difference between MARI and Photoshop when it comes to layer groups, and that is the pass-through functionality. In Photoshop, the groups that you create have the default blend mode applied through them. It's called pass-through. Groups inside of MARI don't do that unless you explicitly tell MARI you want to do that. You can select that layer group here and come up and actually click this little icon here and watch what happens. When I click that pass-through icon, what that's going to allow this luminosity adjustment layer to do is actually affect everything underneath, which is actually going to include the skin texture. So once MARI finishes thinking about that, you can see everything underneath that adjustment layer, even beyond the boundaries of this tattoos group, has been affected. So again, inside of MARI, pass-through functionality for a layer group has to be explicitly defined by clicking on this little button right up here with that group selected. Let me go ahead and turn that off for right now. And you can see we're back to affecting just the contents of that group because this layer, or this adjustment layer rather, lives inside that group. Now notice here the icon for an adjustment layer. It looks like a few little curves that are sprouting out from the left and growing up into the right. Now, you may also notice this icon right over here. And what I want to show you here, let me just go ahead and remove this adjustment layer. This is going to be a good transition into kind of the expanded functionality of adjustment layers. So, what if we wanted to apply an adjustment layer only to a single layer? We wanted to adjust just the texture on that layer and not the layers below it. Or maybe we wanted to take an adjustment layer and we wanted to build multiple adjustments on top of each other and have them affect only a single layer. Well, the same functionality, this stack functionality that we used when we looked at layer stacks and then mask stacks also applies to adjustment layers. We can create what's known as an adjustment stack using this button right here. Notice the icon looks like a little hamburger with those curves, that curved icon in the corner. As a matter of fact, I'm not going to create one because I actually have one right over here for tattoo color. And let me tell you the story behind why this particular adjustment stack was created. So when I was initially designing this tattoo, I painted some color for these feathers. Once I got finished with it, I really didn't like the color, to be honest with you. I liked it much better in a black and white or grayscale rendered format. So let me go ahead and jump over here, and I'm just going to click on this adjustment stack. I created this adjustment stack with this layer selected simply by clicking on this button right here. And if I click on that, what you'll see here is, let me just go ahead and pull this out to the side so we don't dock it, and I'll pin it down. Inside this adjustment stack, I have a single adjustment layer applied. Now, this adjustment layer is an HSV adjustment layer. And if we were to come over here to our adjustments, you can see it's right here. So what I did is I created this adjustment layer and I took the saturation all the way down. Now, you can't really see that here because, again, there's a red X. Just like with the layer masks, we can disable an adjustment stack by shift-clicking on it. So let me just kind of walk through undoing this. I do want to point out the fact that I have a layer mask inside this adjustment stack on the only adjustment layer that's in here. So basically what I've done, if I were to come over and click on that mask, jump to flat lighting and current paint target, what you'll see here is this mask defines that this adjustment can only affect the head. Well, I lied to you. It's the head and it's also affecting the body, but I've used a gray value so it's partially affecting the body. So basically I'm defining where this adjustment stack is allowed to be applied using a layer mask. All right, let's jump back over here and look through the BRDF shader again. And we'll let Mari process that. All right, back to the tattoo. So stepping back through this process, I created this adjustment layer to desaturate that tattoo. Let me show you what that looks like. I'm going to shift click on the adjustment stack over here. That's going to set Mari to work and it's going to process that request. So I've desaturated all the color. I've kept the painted pixels, but I've desaturated the color out of it. So this is what it looks like. Now, I've also noticed up here, I've changed the blend mode for this layer. And I've changed the blend mode to multiply. But this really isn't having the effect that I wanted with that multiply blend mode. As a matter of fact, if I came over and set that back to normal, you're probably not going to see much of a change here from what we currently see on the canvas. So we'll let Mari catch up to me here, process that request. And you can see here that once it does, yeah, really not much of a change. So the reason why, what I'm wanting to do is multiply this grayscale color on top of the skin texture. And again, this boils down to a pass-through issue. Right now, I do not have the pass-through functionality enabled for that tattoo's layer group. Remember, we just looked at that. So let's come back up here and enable that pass-through functionality. We'll go ahead and click on that little button there with our tattoos group selected. And what we should see now is that grayscale painted values that I created as a result of that adjustment stack, it's now allowed to be multiplied down against the skin texture. So it feels much more like an actual grayscale tattoo. We have some shading there. So this is how you can start to utilize adjustment stacks and even pass-through functionality to maybe accomplish a certain goal or a certain visual look that you have in mind. In my mind, I wanted that grayscale feather color that I had multiplied against the skin. So in order to do that, I was able to utilize this adjustment stack as well as a blend mode and the pass-through functionality for this tattoos group and create the look that I was going for. All right, great. So in this video, we've learned how to create both adjustment layers and adjustment stacks here inside of Mari.